Just gonna follow the list today, as always. So disconnect global signals, create a disconnect function. Then if there's still time, I'm going to probably skip the next step, which is to, I think I'm gonna, if there's enough time, I'm probably gonna spend some time creating different elements from source code and seeing how they look like, probably. Because for following this one here, I think it's better if I do it off stream. I'm just gonna watch some tutorials and I'm going to create another project. And I'm going to create the physics element to customize the stuff that I have there on the site. Uh, Let me show that. So basically just create this component here. But for creating from the GUI, I think it's easier to watch tutorials, but I might today start thinking about or trying to create from code because I'm gonna have to create new elements. It's probably from the tutorials they are going to use GDScript to attach the events to determine what happens when you click the buttons. And obviously I want to do it from C++ code. So I'm probably just gonna copy the as much as I can from the way that they do the editor. But I still have to understand how they do the position. I think the position, because from what I've seen, it might be like they might not have a way to put arbitrary positions, if that makes sense, because they use enums to select the position of each thing. So I think that based on the way that they did the editor, they do like fixed positions in certain parts of the screen. So they have enums that determine whether the thing is going to be on the left or the right, for example. And so, but then like you can't move that around. But maybe you can, and I haven't tested that yet. So I'm going to spend time figuring that part out. And I finished. So as far, maybe I won't have to do the complicated stuff that I was thinking about, but I'm going to think about this later because I figure out how to. What was wrong from the previous time is that if you wanna save a node to a thing, then you have to make the nodes that inherit from that node. You have to make the owner of those nodes to be the root of the tree. If you don't make the owner equals to the root and use the root, use the package sync to pack the root, then it doesn't store the other nodes. So this is the reason why it wasn't working before. And also, I changed the name, but I'm not really sure if I'm gonna leave it like this because both leaving like this and doing the other way, I found out that maybe I was overcomplicating things in my mind because it seems that it doesn't matter whether or not you do stuff on the. It kind of matters, but maybe it's not as complicated as I thought it would be because regardless of how many times I run this, it's always gonna put the same nodes, and I'm not really sure why though. I don't have a good idea. It's based on ideas, but I don't understand. Like, obviously, it's because so the thing that I didn't test yet is to put the sub resources. So that's the stuff that I have to test. But for the node itself, I think it makes sense because it doesn't matter. I was conflating the structure of the tree with the functionality of the nodes because the line is still kind of confusing to me to think about. But since the tree is always the same, so what matters is the type of the node you save. If you have the code that is adding the types, it doesn't matter how many times you run the code, it's only gonna add those types. And apparently it doesn't remove the other ones that were created from the GUI, because when the GUI saves the scene, it's packing all the information on the node, and I'm loading that node that was packed in the code here. So the node already has the information, but I don't understand why it doesn't add additional nodes yet. It might be because of the name or something. So I'm gonna have to. I'm not really sure if I'm gonna spend time, but Maybe later. But I'm gonna try to build stuff and then see if it fucks it up, the more complex it is. But what I'm gonna do now is just work on the other nodes that I created. Actually, it's not a node. It's a singleton on the project. So I have to remember what I was gonna do. I think I'm just gonna copy the type that they put here. So this is a class that I created, a singleton class to uh, be able to implement global signals on Godot. So now I want to see if I can. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna need this, I think, right now, but maybe at some points I will. So I think it's a good idea to try to implement this now. I kind of, yeah, last time that I thought about this, it's been a while, so I kind of forgot what I was gonna do. But I think I have to loop over the list there, the linked list. I think, yeah, I'm gonna receive the object. It's gonna be different than this. So I receive the signal, the scope and the signal. So the way that I'm doing is I have a nested hash map. The first key is the scope, which allows you to limit the signal for whatever uh, scope you like. So, and the second one is the name of the signal. So what I have to do is access the nested dictionary. So I can probably copy the way that I did the connect there to check to see if there is a signal or the scope. Then if there is, I loop over. So it's basically going to be the same as the disconnect, but it's going to remove the thing. So the first question is how to remove the callable from the linked list. It's basically this structure here. So I'm going to copy the. Maybe we should put error as well. Maybe on top. Let's put here, whatever. So instead of doing that, instead of passing the callable here, the tricky part about this, I have to see how they do it, but it's figuring out how, because I only want to disconnect, so it depends on how I want to do it. But I think the easiest way is you disconnect from the class that called the, or maybe I can do it like this, where I just pass the object. The tricky thing that I don't know is the reference. So I was thinking about doing, I think I've seen on their code, that they get the object here and they get the object from the callable, I think on the connect, and then you can use that to. But the question that I have is that I'm not really sure if this is gonna work because of the instances of the class. So it's not this get base comparator. It's basically here. So first let me copy the stuff that I have here. So just check to see. Probably gonna do error as well. Setup boolean. It's just easier to do the error because then I can just copy the message here. Or maybe I don't need to though. I think I'm gonna do the error instead of the boolean because then in case I need at some point to, because maybe I need to differentiate when there is a error because of the scope and an error because of the signal. So yeah. So I do an error and then I just return the error. And the problem with this one is that if I do it like this, then it doesn't allow me, I have to remove all the signals for that owner, all the callables that it has for that signal because of the way that I'm doing this. But the issue is if I want to specify, so let's say I have a class that adds different functions to run at one of the signals, once one of the signals is emitted, then I want to only unsubscribe one of the functions from the callable. It becomes a lot harder to figure out how to do this. And I think it's just the ROI to like invest the time to do that is not that high. Maybe it will be necessary at some point, but then once it gets time to think about that, like once I need it, then I think. The question is though, is whether or not it's gonna be very hard to refactor everything if I do things like this. Once I need it, I change. But I think it should be fine. So maybe it's beneficial to think about the alternative way. How would I go about implementing the other way, just so I have an idea in my mind of how easy or how hard it would be to change everything. But I think mainly what would be different, it would be inside of the callable. I can create another class that is exactly the same as the callable, but then I just add some functionality, or maybe I just inherit from the callable, and then I use that class instead. So it would be kind of easy to do it, because then I can encode the logic on the class that inherits from the callable to determine whether or not I can add some other information to determine whether or not which function is going to be. So maybe, yeah, what I would have to do is just pass another variable, another argument here, I think. Yeah, pass another argument, then change the thing from callable to something that inherits from callable. And inside of the callable, I put some other information that based on whatever information I pass here, it decides whether or not the functions are going to stay or be removed from the thing. So here, I'm going to copy paste the code and just change the message. I'm gonna see on the enum if there is a an error that's is like more what I want there. So maybe I add one more here. I think I'm gonna add unavailable scope and unavailable thing. Oh, but maybe if I add, it's gonna fuck up all the other ones. Yeah, I wonder how that because as far as I understand, the enum is just a structure that replaces whatever you put here with uh, numbers. So the order, I think it matters because it changes the number, but I don't think like it matters in the because it shifts everything, right? So I think it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna test. So I'm gonna add two different ones here. The scope, available signal. And just put this stuff here. And the problem is this. I know this is a macro, but I haven't spent too much time. I'm gonna change the message first. With no scope. No scope. I just realized that I made a mistake there. Should put signal here. Oh no, it's because I copied. Yeah, so I just copied from the same one and then changed later for us. Yeah, so I think that's probably correct. Oh. So what I have to do is just loop over. So I'm just gonna copy from the other thing, from the emit. This thing, so now I remember when I was trying to do the manager class, the singleton, I had a bunch of problems, but I figured out eventually that the problems were because it didn't have the semicolon at the end of the class declaration. So all those problems were related to problems that I had here on this class when I was trying to implement, which is stuff that was showing up related to the class DB and the registering thing, but like the errors didn't reflect very well the place that they were coming from. That makes sense. And I think it's just because it's hard because of the nature of how they design everything. And I think the nature why the nature of how they design everything is the way that it is because of C++. So I think that they use a bunch of macros and they do things that, because now it's more clear on my mind after thinking about this. Like if I have to implement the stuff of versioning systems to keep track of the caching, that makes a lot of sense. Whenever I have something that you need to maintain based on the cache of memory you have, it's very likely that you're gonna have to implement some form of metaprogramming, which means you're gonna have to use code to write code. So in this case, they use code to write. They use macros to write code. And I think that the reason why they do like this is just because of flexibility. When it comes to class DBs, it's because of flexibility, because then it allows people to register different classes that they create on the modules, and because obviously they don't have control over how people are going to do things, then they create a macro to implement functionality that is going to register the class. So that makes a lot of sense. And on the other parts, when it comes to GDScript, is the same thing because of the versioning of the system, and the functions can reflect the versioning, so the file is generated at compile time, at build time, actually. So I think that makes a lot of sense, but then the downside is that it becomes very hard to figure out what is going on. And I think this is a side effect of this. So here I comment this stuff out because I remember I was getting a bunch of errors. So what I'm going to do first is compile. So I think I'm going to finish the disconnect function first. Then if that works, I'm going to... the problem is that I might have to test as well. So maybe I'll finish the disconnect and I'll test. So the way that I think about a test is I created two different classes there that already have that I created for testing the global signal in the first place, the connect and the emit. So probably what I'm going to do is after the function is emitted for the first time, I'm just going to call the disconnect global signal after that, and then try to click the button again. But I'm probably going to have to change the logic as well, because I was doing the logic to move the mesh from one place to another. But then I'm going to have to change so that first I'm going to have to change so it moves back and forth. And after I do that, then I put the disconnect and see if it changes anything. So maybe I'll do all this stuff first. Or I think I'm going to try to compile here and see if it works. But the problem is if can have more mistakes. Huh? So maybe before I do the disconnect, I should comment everything out and then try to figure this out. Because I'm not really sure if it's necessary to put this stuff as well. It's just because they have on the other one, so maybe it's a good idea to leave this stuff here. So this happens whenever there was an error calling the function. That's probably a good idea, but it's gonna be annoying as well because there's stuff here that probably gonna have to change. So I'm gonna finish the function, then comment it out. Then I think I uncomment this stuff. See if there is an error, and then I'll think about what to do. So yeah, I was gonna look for, before I talked about this stuff, I was gonna look for the loop there that the emit has. It's basically this stuff here. So this just accesses the callables based on the scope and the signal. So here this is the place where I was thinking about just getting this. So the thing is, there's two different ways. One is with the object, and the other one is the object ID. Because I think that the way that it's similar, but it's different, and I'm not really sure yet about the nuances of this, but they store objects as well in an object slot, which is a global variable that they use to keep track of objects. And they also store on class DB. So I think for storing on object slots, they use the object ID, but I'm not really sure. It might be on both, or I'm not really sure about this part, but I do remember that inside of the callable somewhere, there is some stuff related to this, that it returns the object ID Maybe it's on the initialization. So maybe I should look for the callable MP macro. Because one thing that I can do is obviously compare the object ID of both of them, and the other thing is try to compare the object, but I'm not pretty sure if it's gonna work. Because the thing is C++ and the types. So the question is whether or not. So this easy version is of what I'm trying to do. Or maybe I'll have to. These another things because of the difference between address and pointer. Like the question I have in my mind right now is if I dereference this on the owner, if it's actually gonna get the like how is this comparison is gonna work? Unless they haven't overloaded something, I think can't really do this. And then here would have to be like this. Not sure. But I think that's unlikely that this works. So there's probably an easier way to do it. The easier way is probably gonna be using class DB. And I have to think about what. Because I do remember a bunch of different points where they use functions from class DB to get the type of an object or something like this. Either class DB or the object slots thing. So it's probably on the macro somewhere. So the signal is created with the ID. This is the place, I think. There was remember. So this is when he calls the method, but is when you initialize the callable without another callable. You just pass the method and the instance directly. So it uses this stuff. So I guess I can copy this thing here, but yeah, let me think about this. Maybe it's the other way. Because what I want, not really sure if object ID is gonna be. Because I don't understand how this works very well. Like if I could compare based on this. So what I want is to not get the instance, but get the object ID from the instance. But maybe because this accepts the class. So maybe if I just yeah, let me see the constructor of this. Hey man, what's up? Yeah, this is my implementation of global signals on source code. I tested only on one case, very simple case, so I'm not really sure if it's gonna work everywhere, but it seems that it works fine for now. Hmm. Yes, yeah, actually, it's probably these ones. But in that situation, you're passing the object, so you're not really passing an integer. Not really sure what's going on, but maybe this is not. So this is an integer. Hmm. So I guess I can try based on the callable. Mm. So getting from the callable is probably easy, but because I can just access this, but the question is how do I get from the object here? So I have to see what this is doing. Maybe, yeah, I think this one is gonna use this lots. So this one uses lots. So the question is how to get the ID from the object, I think. If I can't do that, then probably have to see if I can compare the two. Or think about a different way to do this. I'm just gonna see if I can ask Perplexity. I'm not pretty sure if it's the best way to ask this. Perplexity probably uses ChatGPT under the hood. Just his website here. It's kind of like Google, but with AI embedded into it. I don't like the changes that they made to ChatGPT. It seems that they're getting data from everyone now. Before, they gave you the option to decide whether or not you uh, provided your chats for them to use as history to train the AI. But now I think they are using for everyone. I'm not 100% sure, but based on the stuff that I've seen there, it seems that they are getting the using the information for everyone should train their AI model. I want to move to using my own, uh, but for now it's too much work. But eventually I'm gonna do that probably. Because now you have a bunch of alternatives for, or you have a bunch of open source ones, I think. So it seems that they don't overload the double equal operator. So let me see if there's anything here. I think the way is to use class DB somehow. Or instance ID. So the question is whether or not all the objects are gonna have this instance ID on them. So let me see on the function. The thing is, it depends, but I think all of them are gonna call this one. I do remember seeing stuff about object ID. So it just creates the class info based on the global thing. There isn't anything about object ID here. Hmm. So the question is, how do I I guess that's the main question. How to compare both objects? So obviously, if both of them have the ID, I can just get from the callable there, like I seen, and I can get from the object based on the instance ID. But the thing is, I'm not really sure if it is always going to be the case that the object has the instance ID. So I guess I can try that, and then the concern that I have with trying is that even if it works, maybe like somewhere along the line it's gonna break down. So I have to think about how I'm gonna put. I'm going to put a check there to see. How can I put a message that? So maybe I should check first to see. So how to make sure that the object always has the object ID or the instance ID. The callable I think is always gonna have based on the initialization there, because you use the macro usually to subscribe the callable. So, but the thing is because here there isn't anything. This is the function that is used to. So you put the macro inside of the class, and then the name of the class is gonna be this M class here. So you're just gonna register the class you're creating through the. So this eventually is gonna be called along with the. I think every time you initialize an object, this gets called, and then it's just gonna call this function because this function comes from the object-based class, I think. So this function here is the one that is gonna subscribe the object to the class DB, and here is gonna subscribe based on the type you called with the macro, which is just the GD class macro here. So the thing is, This is the implementation on the object. Because object is the base class of all the objects that are registered on the class DB. So they're just inheriting based on whether or not you add the macro to the class. So the question is how to check. So I guess I can check to see if it's a null pointer. I'm just gonna ask on the thing there. So it would be instance ID dot ID, I think. But it feels like kind of bad because probably there's not gonna be. Maybe you should put before everything, because then. So let's say signal owner instance ID dot ID is equal to null pointer, or actually it would be instance ID. So yeah, I guess this is an easier way. So it's gonna be 0 if it isn't initialized. So I just check for ID. If it's 0, then I throw an error message. And then I'm gonna put this as an unavailable. So objects. But the thing about this is that I'm not really sure if all objects are gonna always have the instance ID. So it's kind of bad. But I'm gonna leave this. So I'm gonna write this here, then comment it out, then probably search for whether or not I can compare. I'm gonna ask on Perplexity what is the best way to compare. Because the key thing, which is always annoying on C++ because it's very hard to think about memory because you can't visualize. So the key here is to figure out how to compare both objects, because it's tricky because of the memory, because I'm not really sure, like based on the way that they initialize everything's gonna be on the memory pool. Also, this is another thing that I figured out. I was getting an error of memory leak on the stuff that are implementing, creating scenes from source code, the stuff that I'm doing there on the manager. So the way that I solve that is just by putting mem delete. So the way that it works is that Godot is gonna automatically delete everything from memory, everything that is a part of the scene tree. And it's gonna do that based on an event that happens, I think, after on the main loop finalize or something like that. So after you close the window, let's say, I think it's gonna emit signal, and then that signal is gonna save the editor settings and stuff like that. Then after that, it's gonna emit another signal, and that signal is gonna call a function on the scene tree that is gonna traverse the tree, and I think it doesn't traverse. That happens before, I think, where it sends a signal for each node that allows them to call functions that are gonna delete this stuff from the node. But I think that it's not necessary for you to explicitly delete the node inside of the node function, because that happens from the scene tree, because the scene tree owns all the nodes. So but it just depends on the way that you do things, and that distinction I don't know very well yet, but I know that on the editor node they're going to delete some things, some nodes that they create, and not delete others. So I guess it just depends on how much the scene tree is going to delete. But for my case, obviously it wasn't deleting because the class that I created is not a part of the scene tree. It's just it's a global singleton class. And I did this when I create this one here to delete. They have a place there. I'm gonna show there. Because basically I just copied the way that they did there to create this one. So they have this function here that gets called probably at some point after you initialize everything, or once it's time to clean up everything. Just gonna call this function, and this one deletes all the global signals. So this is something that I have to do on the other one also to delete the thing. And then I just changed the destructor here. Sure. And to create the function, I just asked ChatGPT. It's basically, yeah, it's basically a recursive function, and then it just deletes all the nodes from the whatever I have on the project things, because I have to create them to create the tree and save the new stuff. And then I did both these, which is on the destructor here. So it loops over all the project things, then it deletes all the nodes. And I did this on the headless after everything is called, should also delete the singleton from the class. And obviously I think that can't be done from here because then it's part of the class, so it does make sense. So object doesn't have instance ID. But I want to see, so I'm going to comment that out, and I'm going to see if I can think about a way to... I'm going to ask there on the perplexity to see if I can figure out a way. And this is another thing here. So how can I get something from the object that I can put as a string there in an easy way? I think I'm not gonna put anything, honestly. It's better if I put something, but it's kind of annoying to... I'm gonna have to think about a way to extract some information. So basically, instead of putting the object there, I have to create a string so I can put it, so I can, because the string class has it overloads the plus operator and then it does some stuff on memory to concatenate the two strings together. So I can't really pass the object instance there. I have to figure out a way to transform that into a string. But it's kind of annoying to think about. This is another thing I'm not really sure. Like the key is the pool here, because I don't understand this very well. But it's basically a global object that's gonna put all the objects on. So this is just creating a pointer to that based on the type, I think. But it's kind of annoying to think about this. So I'm just gonna remove this stuff here, so I know how to think about this now. I guess I can just put the... So I'm gonna look into the constructor and see if I can initialize with I need a string. Actually, I think I can get from the class DB thing. So let me see the connect function again. So on the connect function, they have something. Just see, is this part here? I get class name. That's the function. But this is gonna be. I guess I can call from the object. Yeah, so I can do this. Get class name. Yeah. So hopefully this works. So this is gonna look for the name on the class DB, I think. I don't think I can compare names, obviously, because it has to be the signal has to be related to the instance that's subscribed. So it has to be the logic for disconnecting has to be similar to the logic for connecting, obviously. Right here I'm passing the callable. So when I create the callable, I create from the macro, the same way that they do on the normal signals. So the macro is going to have the instance because it receives as an argument. The first argument is going to be the instance. The second argument is going to be the function, which is the method that there is going to be used to call there. So inside the callable should be, I should use this because this is the way that they're going to have there. And then obviously they have the same stuff. They have the ID as well. So this is not object, it's just the ID. So obviously I can, this is the easiest way that I can think about it right now. You just compare the two different IDs because then you're comparing numbers. So if all the objects are required to have the instance ID, then I think this works. But the issue is if they don't, then I have to figure out a way to. Actually, it would be from the callable, not from the. I just realized the name here. So I wouldn't need this stuff. Just get from the callable. Oh, but this is just when. Yeah, I remember now. So this is just when it is initialized. So when you call the macro, is gonna initialize a callable with another callable, which is this custom. So it isn't gonna have this thing here. So I think I have to do that. That's probably why they use get comparison, get base comparator. And this function, I think it gets either one. So if it is custom, yeah, so it returns the base callable, I think. I understand. So what I would have to do is just get, because if you have a custom, then I think the reason why they did this is to make it easier to compare because of the ID thing there. Because it's using a union to save the information of the ID. So it's either an ID or a custom because that's what the union does. Whenever you create a union, it's just going to be like kind of a shared space in memory, or like one of the things inside of the union is going to be the thing that occupies the memory. That's depending on the way that you initialize things. So I think it's an exclusive thing. So it's either going to be the ID or the custom, and then to compare would be kind of annoying because you have to do true if statements there. So I think they created this function for that reason, because then when you use the get base comparator, you're just going to return the whatever callable has the ID, I think. but I'm not really sure. So let me go again. So to clarify this, so it's gonna call, if it is a custom, it's gonna call the get base comparator on the custom. Or the comparator is gonna be this. And then, so it returns the base callable, I think. Because the base one is not gonna be a custom, because it's the one that was initialized with the other one, I think. Yeah, because on the macro, you create another callable, which is a callable custom, and then you use that to initialize the callable class. So when you do that, and then you compare there, it gets the one that is the root, let's say. It is very confusing though. Hate when this happens. So this doesn't have base comparator. So I was trying to remember the custom. So I have to see the initialization of the callable, or the constructor of the callable, when you pass the custom. But I'm pretty sure it's gonna store the other callable as custom, and then it's just gonna call the get base comparator from that callable. So it's calling from here, and yeah, the custom is gonna be whatever you initialize. So in the case you use the macro, the custom is gonna be this class here, or the other class that this inherits from, or the other class that inherits from this. So I guess it's just gonna return. It's kind of weird. Yeah, I'm probably missing something, because this one returns no pointer. Hmm. Thing is, I remember that I had the same confusion the first time that I saw this, and then I clarified somehow, but I don't remember how. Because here, what it seems like based on the way that I'm thinking now is that it's gonna return a null pointer if initialized with the macro there when it gets the base comparator, because it's accessing from the custom, and the custom is the one that you use to initialize, which is gonna be this one. So it means that. Hmm. There's another thing I can look into later. I want to focus on this other stuff now. So the question is, so is the custom here? This is gonna return this null pointer. So this is why it's weird. Doesn't make any sense there. Obviously, I'm missing something. So when you call this, it's going to be the callable that was initialized with custom. So this is going to return true. Should this one remember? So the question is, oh, because this is not gonna, yeah, let's see. So because this is not gonna be a null pointer, it's not gonna return this. But it's kind of weird. So whenever, yeah, but the thing is, the other custom callables don't have base comparator. The only one that has is the base class there. So I don't see why, because when you're calling from the normal callable, let's say, but the normal callable is just gonna stop, I think. No, the normal callable is gonna be a null pointer, because this is not gonna be true, and this is not gonna be true, so it's just gonna return this. Oh no, returns the instance. Yeah. So if the custom callable has a base comparator, then it's gonna you can change functionality. Otherwise, it just returns the instance, which is this. So in the case I was looking there, it makes sense because this is gonna be no pointer, so this is not gonna pass, and it's just gonna return this instance. And this instance is gonna be the custom callable. So the custom callable is gonna have the information, I think. It's very confusing. So I was gonna remember. It's easier to go from here again. Wanna remember what information this one holds. So it's passed an instance and the methods. So the instance, so it is gonna have, so it's initialized with the instance of the methods. So it is gonna have the thing there. It's on the data. So this is the thing that was, this is the information here. I remember I wrote this down as well. Yeah, but this is different though. That's the thing. Hmm. So maybe I have to check to see. The thing is that they don't check here, so. But what I'm thinking about doing is just using this basic operator there to check. So it would have to be here. Maybe actually, yeah. I'm just overcomplicated because I can just get the object and then get from the object, like just do the same thing. And maybe it would be better to get from here. Because they're both getting from the callable, so it's kind of the same thing. But then the question I had is that if it is a custom, then I'm gonna have to access through the data there. And if it isn't, then I ask access through from the ID. So this is the thing that I'm not really sure. So I guess it's just easier to use this one. So I'm gonna try this out and then see what happens. But even if it works, it's not very good to me. That's kind of the problem. Because I'm not really sure if it's always gonna be the case that the objects have the ID. So it seems that there should be another way, maybe through class DB or something, that it would allow me to do this. It's not that important for now, so maybe it doesn't matter that much. You can just track based on the same way there. Oh, there's probably a function as well on the object. Let me search for this. Let's see. Got instance ID. Oh, get instance ID. Yeah, it's better to use this one. I should have just typed it out. Yeah, so this only works if both of them have it. So now remove from the list. So maybe I'll leave it like this and then, yeah, because it might be necessary to do this, even though I'm not gonna use because of the sync transition. So this is the thing that I'm not, but because it's global, yeah, it's useful to have, but so I don't think it's like a very high priority thing you need to have, but it's probably very useful to have. It might be actually because it might be necessary because of the memory. So there could be a situation with dangling pointers. Yeah, that can be the problem because so maybe I am forced to do this now. Because if you, let's say you have a class that connected, then the class is removed from the tree, then you have to, is when the signal is emitted, it's gonna try to call the function from a class that doesn't exist. So it's gonna be a problem. I'm not really sure. I think that they have, I've seen, I don't remember where, but I do think that they have functions like this on their own classes, that's on the editor classes, that on the event that is emitted when the node gets out of the tree, it does some stuff, either deletes some memory and then disconnects from the signals. So I guess I can look for that. I'm gonna look for that on the normal signals to see usually where it happens. And then I'm gonna have to. I don't like when there's the situations, but I think they're kind of inevitable at some points where because it seems kind of decoupled. So the reason why I don't like is because there's higher risk. So like there isn't a clear way in my mind to enforce every time, unless you like you have to remember every time that you're creating a node to put the functionality on the part that's on the function that is going to be called to when the node goes out of the tree to disconnect the signals from the thing. So if you forget, then there is a chance because it's going to be hard because then when the event's emitted, you might be doing some other stuff because it was a problem that didn't break on compile time. It breaks on runtime. So it's a lot harder to figure out. Once the moment comes, if this happens, because the error could be somewhere else or a bunch of other places. So it might be very annoying. But I don't think there is a way to enforce every time that's because you have to remember. Unless I put it on the object class, that could be a good idea. So basically on the destructor of the object class, I could put something that checks to see if the object, maybe they done this for the connections, the data structure that I have there. So basically check to see if the object, I just run the disconnect signal there. Hmm, yeah. But here I don't think that there, at the nodes, there isn't anything you can do because you have to delete it from the outside of the thing. So I think I should change here. So they do have connection size. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. So let me write here to remember. Thank God I remember this. Or I realize this now. I do remember seeing these functions as I was typing over, but obviously I didn't spend too much time because I was focused on the other stuff. So they check for the size and then they delete each one. It's probably the same thing that I'm gonna do. So I think I'm just gonna run the disconnect function that I have there, and then it's gonna check. The question is different because the way that they do signals, they keep track of the information on the object class. So the question is whether or not it's worth it to also put on the object class. Because the way that I'm doing is obviously like it's another purpose. So it's the global class that manages the data. But I don't think that it matters that much. It's annoying because it's gonna throw an error if the so let's say I put it here to just call the disconnect function from the global signals. Oh, this is another problem that I didn't think about. But I guess the object is not a global signals class, a global singleton. So the problem is that I just thought about is the initialization, but I think it's probably not gonna be a problem. I'm not really sure though. It's tricky because the object is tightly connected with the class DB, so. But like the way that I'm thinking now is, let's say I create something here that accesses the. This part is the one that I'm not sure now because I don't know. It's gonna be a problem because this is gonna be initialized at a certain point. So and this object class is very connected with the class DB, so I'm not really sure if it's gonna be an issue if I put the singleton here. It doesn't seem very good. So maybe it would be better to create a data structure inside of the object to keep track of the signals as well. I do remember that I thought about this, but then I thought that it was too annoying to do it now, and it was just easier to implement the global class. But now I think it's probably better if I do it like this. So it's still obviously going to be global signals, but then I put some additional information on the object class to disconnect. But then how would this work? I would still have to. It could be something that I check to see on the object first. Yeah, but I still have to call the global thing. There is another way, but it seems a lot more complicated, which is using the reference that they use. Because I think the ref class, I'm not 100% sure, but maybe I do think that the ref class keeps references, but I'm not really sure if it uses the ref count class to do that. But I do think that it keeps classes. So is the same way that Python works, where you, it's gonna keep track of how many things are using that object throughout the thing, and it's gonna add or delete at some points in the ref function to keep track of that, to manage the memory, obviously. So, like one other way would be to, instead of using the object I turn the object into a resource using ref in a similar way that they do with the packaging, and then based on the references, I figure out whether or not to disconnect from the global signals. So that way I would be able to keep track from the global signals instead of having to change the class here. But I think that way sounds a lot more complicated to me. That's a problem. So this is actually a massive problem. It's annoying. So I'll be right back. But now I think that's the main priority because I think this is actually important. It's more important than disconnecting the signal because it's gonna be the dangling pointer thing. So I have to figure out a way to make sure that the signal never gets called if the object doesn't exist. But maybe I can put that on the mid signal though. I think that's probably the easiest solution, so that's probably what I'm gonna do. So just put an additional check on the mid signal to see if before the callable calls, if the instance still exists. But I'm not really sure if that's gonna be possible. But I'm gonna spend some time trying to figure this out. So be right back. So the one thing that I thought about is to look parsing the signals, emit signal. I'm not really sure if they put that there. Because the first thing that came to my mind and it makes more sense. Because if you check on the emit signal to see if the instance exists before calling the method, then it returns something, a message, an error, whatever. Then obviously it would prevent this from happening and I don't have to do anything. I guess I can implement because I'm implementing a different version of emit signal. So I can do that on my own there. So I guess the first place to look at is this one. Because obviously it's gonna remove there. So I have to see if I can get the instance from here. Get instance. So the question is whether or not this is gonna return. So I should look for this examples. Yeah. So I guess I can use like this. So I think that this is probably the simplest way. I'm going to put on the emit signal there. And then before the loop, I'm going to, hey, what's up? I'm going to yeah, here, I can check here. Maybe this, oh, actually this valid should be enough already because I do remember now that they have a check there on the other one. So I think it's probably on, I don't remember which one though. I don't know if it's connect or the emit signal. I think that it's on the connect that they have the check. They created some extra memory in case someone connects. There's some message there I'm gonna show. I'm trying to implement the disconnect function on a emit or on a global signals that class that I created. So it's a singleton on Godot that the purpose is for you to be able to send information from nodes that are at different parts of the tree. But it's just from C++ code, so it's not from GDScript. So I just basically added a new class. Yeah, yeah. Changing the Godot's source code. Maybe it's on the emit signal. Yeah, it has to be on the emit if it's not there. So this part here, this is a ref counted object prevented from being destroyed during a signal emission, which is needed in certain edge cases. So they allocate memory here. Actually, this is probably, yeah, this is not related actually. But this is the one. Sure that disconnecting the signal or even deleting the object will not affect the signal calling. So this is the thing though. I'm not really sure why they enforce. How is that possible? Because if you delete the object, shouldn't that stop you from calling the callback function? Yes, I'm on YouTube and Twitch at the same time. I want it to be sometime. Probably I'm gonna stream on Twitter, but not now. That's why I did the Twitch is very hard to grow, so I don't really care that much about it right now. which is a lot easier if you already have a lot of people. And YouTube is much better, I think, because the streams stay on YouTube after, so it's much better to grow. I'm gonna see on this one first. On the function that calls, usually it's gonna be this one because usually it's a custom callable. I think I'm gonna have to see the macro again because this one is gonna go to the wrong definition. But sometimes it is gonna call from here. So this is the weird thing. Because the situation that I'm thinking about is what if the object doesn't exist anymore? So in this case, they would try to call from an object that doesn't exist. And they do that on purpose there. So I'm not really sure how this works. If not objects. Also, but this is only if you have this enabled, which is kind of weird. So what should I do? The obvious thing that I'm thinking about, because now I'm not really sure if it's necessary for me to do that, because they don't do it here. It's just an optional thing, which is kind of weird. This is not usually the call. There's gonna be, because VS Code goes to the wrong definition. So I have to follow from the macro there again. Just see. This one. So I think this is the function that is usually gonna be called. Also, it does have a message here. So this fails if it doesn't have the object. This is exactly what I was gonna do though. So it gets from the data, from the callable that has the object ID, which is the thing that is used on the beginning there. When you initialize the custom callable, is gonna update the information like I saw there just now. So invalid ID. So let me think about this. Yeah, I think I can't use this to compare because it's just gonna return the object. So, so maybe I don't need to. So the question is, why do they? I think that they delete the scripts because it's different, but they do delete the signals as well. That's the thing. But I guess it doesn't matter because like it's just gonna throw that message there, and based on the documentation that I've seen from Godot, they usually they do things like this is the philosophy that they have where they try to never crash the engine and just display messages. So obviously it's not very good because the messages are gonna show there in my case, this stuff that I'm doing. But I think it doesn't matter that much because so maybe unless I'm thinking about because what happens so let's say there's another situation where you remove like the object gets deleted. The problem is this mismatch, I think, because if the object gets deleted and the callable still has the list of callables still has that callable for that object, then it's kind of bad. So I do think it would make sense, but then it would make sense to put on the constructor, but then it's kind of annoying because I'm not really sure if it's a good pattern to access the global class from here because it doesn't make a lot of sense, and also because then it becomes tricky because of when the object is going to be initialized for the first time. Because this object class is tightly related to the class DB because they both are used all the time to register everything and to manage everything. So it does make sense here that they delete here because when the object gets deleted, you should Like I should synchronize with the global thing. This is the problem. So ideally I would be able to do here. I guess I can just test and see what happens. So, but first I'm gonna put a comment here, then I'm gonna finish the other stuff there. Then after I do that, then I try to see what happens. So what I was thinking about doing is just call, because of the way that I did class is just singleton. It's gonna be a global singleton. So just access that, and then I just call disconnect. I don't need to do it. I don't need to check as well, I think. But maybe it is better to check. So maybe I create another function on the global signal, because the structure and everything is private. But I'm not really sure if it's necessary. Because I can put on the disconnect function. And the problem is the scope. So one thing that I can do is a nested, but I'm not really sure if it matters that much. Maybe it does actually, because then it's going to be called each time. So it's probably better to check. So what I'm thinking about is, like, what if how I'm going to know the scopes and the signals that the object is subscribed to? So obviously it makes more sense to just check all of them and then disconnect all of them if it has. So do a nested for loop, one time for the signals, the other time for one time for their scope, the other time for the signals. Then instead of that, yeah, it has to be like 3 times for loop, let's say. But it's not that good actually. Something to think. So another thing I can do is just create another data structure on the global signals. I think that's much better actually, now that I think about it. So create another data structure and map the object instances IDs with the callables. So create a hash map. Yeah. I do think I need the scope still. The scope matters and the signal name matters because of the order to emit, obviously. So for synchronization, it matters to have both the scope and the signal to determine what's going to be emitted. But I do think that I have to create another one. So the main question I have, I'm going to ask this through Perplexity, is whether or not all the objects are required to have. When you initialize an object, you're going to call these other functions to register on class DB, and if that's going to automatically create the ID. I guess I can also step over, just see again. Just put breakpoints and then step over. Because if it's not required, then I think it's going to be more complicated. If it is required, I can just do what I'm thinking about right now. So I'm thinking about creating another data structure here, and then it just puts a hash map. And then it's going to be object. Yeah, actually it would be an integer. I have to see the type there. So I'm going to look this one. Instance ID. Huh, interesting. So how is it possible that I guess I have to put another thing there. It's gonna be the ID. So I was confusing the two different times there that it checks. So the reason why it's possible to use object DB get instance and then pass that this stuff here is because it's gonna check on the object DB, which is the global thing that's the global variable that they use to keep track of all the objects. It's gonna check to see if there is an instance ID on that object, I think. So if there's the class that is that represents, like, encapsulates the instance ID. So I think here I have to do ID and then ID on the other one to see if they are the same. And on the other one I put the type. here. Well, maybe it's better to do object ID instead, because that's how they do it usually. And this is kind of weird, so I guess I can't do this. Or I'm missing the thing here. Probably. Yeah. So either I can do it like this, where I keep track of the... But the thing is, it's tricky because I don't understand very well the... I think it only makes sense that all of them are going to be unique. Because otherwise you would access the same thing on the global... I think it's a global hash map, the objects. I forgot where it was. Just search for... I have here. So this thing is a global... No, it's a global class. This is probably a struct inside of the class, I think. Hmm. The thing is that's weird about this is this max count here. That's another thing that's kind of weird to me. Because like maybe this is something that's only used for the singletons on the thing. Because it wouldn't make a lot of sense to... Actually, it might, because I remember that when you add the thing, it increases the thing. So it expands. It's like a vector. When you reach the limit for the memory, it's just gonna expand. So I think the max is not like... Yeah, but they do the bitwise shift there, the ends. So it might be a max actually. Hmm. This was the stuff that I was talking about. Yeah, so when you add in this instance, it increases. I do remember going over this some time ago. So it's probably tracking all the objects. And it does that through the thing. So the slot's going to be destruct inside of the class. So the slot has the object instance. So they access through here. Or they update here. And it returns the object ID. Hmm. Pretty sure that this is used at some points, but it's not showing there. Hmm. I'm trying to clarify this. It's weird that it doesn't show here. Like, oh, it's because I'm putting on the editor. I put the editor here to see some stuff related to this. When I was building the manager thing there to write the code from scratch. I put here to simplify the search to find some stuff. So I'm trying to clarify the relationship between the object ID and the classes. See. This is the one that has the bits-wise thing that I was talking about, but it's different. So I do think it makes sense that the object slots is going to be this class that holds the information, which is going to be an array, even though it's not initialized as an array because I just gonna when it initializes in instance, I think. So this is gonna be an object slots. That's is this thing. So this is probably a singleton, I think. Oh, it's a pointer. So yeah, and it's a static pointer. So it's a global variable that is an array of slots because it's a pointer. So in C++ and in C and C++ is gonna work like this. So when I have that's how strings work. So a string is just a pointer to a place in memory that is gonna concatenate a bunch of things. So this is just an array of object slots. And this is a global thing that they use to keep track of all the objects. So I do think it makes sense that, but the question is the relationship between that and the add instance. That's the thing. Oh, so it is on the construct object. So yeah, for each object that they are gonna update. So this is gonna run on the constructor of the object. Yeah. So each one has the instance ID, and it gets based on calling this function, which is gonna add this to the object slots by passing this reference here. And this returns the object ID with the ID. So if I see, so the question is what is the ID here? And it's gonna be a hash to find the object on the global thing. So the hash based on these bitwise operations. So it's based on this validator counter. I think this one was the one used there to, no. It's probably on the objects. No, it has to be on the object DB. No, it's one more thing. It's just initializing here, but it's gonna be a static. So it's probably a static global variable that increases each time. That makes sense. So this is another global variable probably. So they use this global variable to keep track of the expansion and contraction of the thing, I think. And that's how they figure out the max there. Which when to reallocate memory to this stuff here. So the ID is gonna be based on this stuff. It's a global thing. The question is what do they... So each time they're gonna increase by 1 and they're gonna use this mask here. So if it's 0, it becomes 1. And then they keep track of that on the validator, which is the slots there, on the slots, which has the validator. Yeah, so now I understand. So it is the way that I was thinking about, because I did the same thing on the same thing on the similar way on the other thing. I think I got it from TruePP. So TruePP implements a similar thing where each time you create a program, it has a static variable. A static variable is just another way to say global variable. That's like it's going to be the same throughout the execution of the program. So each time, because it is going to be the same, you can increase it by 1, and then every time that, for example, in the constructor, you can increase by 1, and then every time that a class like that is initialized, it's going to increase that ID by 1. So it's a global variable that is used to keep track of the unique thing references to objects. So I think I understand now. So it is true that all the objects are going to have the ID, and they're going to be tracked through this thing on the instance ID, which is the variable there, which the value is going to be this thing here, which is going to be based on the bitwise stuff. So I can assume that each one is going to be unique, I think. So here is going to return that thing, the object ID, and then through the object ID, I get the ID, which is going to be the unique number. So now let me go back to, so now I'm more confident about implementing like this. So the thing I have to see is how to remove from the list, the callable from the list. It's probably going to be, I guess I can just call the list and see based on the hints that it gives. So the way that I added was just with the pushback, and I did it like this, so it's easier. Here just puts pop, probably. Yeah, pop. So if I'm pushing back, what makes more sense? I'm just gonna put pop because it's easier. I think it's just pop. Signal callback. So if the owner is the same of the target from the thing, I remove from the linked list. And for the emit signal, I think I can just leave it like this because it's gonna check inside of the call. Uh, and then it's gonna throw that error if it doesn't. So this one is the one that I can change. I can put the message there that they put on the emit signal, I think. So signal owner. I have to see based on the way that they do the other one. Because here is like this. It has to be narrow. Here I think is a dot because I'm already accessing the thing through the pointer. I think the check they did was different. Was the object DB. So it's probably easier to do object DB. Yeah, I'm just gonna put the same condition there because it's easier. I just think. And then I'm gonna put the same. Actually, I should just put the error message that they put there. Let me see the message that they put. Yeah, it's this message here. I think I'm just gonna put this one instead of this condition here. Well, that should be data. But this is because it's from the callable, I think. Right, it's doing this from the callable, so the callable has the instance. But in my case would be the data. And they're passing the object ID. So I should just pass the object ID as well. But I do think that's it's gonna be this. Now, I do think that I should put some identifier here so that I don't confuse with the other one. Object ID. Or maybe before. So now, so this is gonna send the message, it's gonna show the message if it doesn't have. But maybe I do want to return. Actually, I'm confusing things. This one should go on the other one, I think. This should go on the emit, and for disconnecting, it doesn't matter because it's on the. Maybe it does matter, not really sure. I think this shouldn't have the thing here. I shouldn't have this. So the question is, does it matter if I try to remove one that doesn't exist? It goes back to the thing about keeping track of the signals and disconnecting them. So it goes back to the thing of whether or not I should change the object class so that I call this disconnect here. But that's kind of tricky because I don't think it's very good to couple the global class inside of the object. So I have to think about another way. So the other way is to keep track on the global signals, I think. The problem is I would have to keep track of the reference. This is the issue. I think the question is how to remove the callable after the object was deleted, because then I'm not gonna have the pointer to the object. But if I'm calling disconnect, I'm calling from the object already. So I should always, when I call this function, I should always have the thing, because it's the thing that is disconnecting itself from the thing. That makes sense. But the tricky part is like if I want to remove. So from the object's perspective, when the object is deleted or goes out of the tree, how do I automatically delete the callable from the, or whether or not I want the callable should be deleted? Maybe I don't want, and I just leave there because then it doesn't matter. Because the emit signal is gonna have the message there already. I guess I have to copy. So I just copy the message here. And the other one I leave without the message. Because it doesn't matter that much. Because this is only gonna be called from the thing that is gonna maybe there is situations where it's possible that like a class calls a disconnect for another class. That makes sense. But I think it doesn't matter that much. So let's say it gets called and the thing doesn't have an instance. Then will this fuck it up? It's just easier. I'm gonna put it on both because it's easier and whatever. Doesn't matter. And I think I don't need to remove from if the object, because it is global, so yeah, it does leak memory though. That's the thing. But yeah, it's kind of tricky. It's something that I think I have to do from the objects from the classes that I connect. It can't be on the object class, I think. So it's just something that I have to remember to disconnect. which is not very good because then like there's higher chances that you're gonna forget, and this is the issue. But the problem is that there can be situations, for example, where I guess I have to spend more time studying the emit signal there because like if the object was deleted, then how would the callback be called? That's the thing. But there are situations where, but even in these situations, the other thing I'm not really sure is because the ID is going to be different. That's the problem. So let's say you have an object that is deleted, and then later on the object is added again. The ID is going to be different, so I can't really check based on the ID, I think. Because the signal would have to work regardless of whether or not the object was deleted. Deleted and reinstantiated. Hmm. But the thing is, I can't think about a way to, like, obviously the constructor and destructor of classes would be the place where you would do this, where like you would disconnect and reconnect every time that the class goes, but then it becomes decoupled, I think. Yeah, but maybe that's the only way. Yeah. So I'm gonna leave it like this for now. So the only thing that I have to think about now is whether or not it's worth it to, or I have to return when this happens, or I just leave it like this. So it's gonna emit here. It's gonna call if it doesn't have the thing. And now that I think about it, it's inside of the callable, so I don't need to put the check here because it's inside of the callable already. So even though I'm creating another function, it's gonna be still using the same thing that they use to call. So I think I don't need to put now that I remember this. This is inside of the call. So I'm just gonna delete. So if the signal is emitted in the callable, and the instance for the callable doesn't exist, then it's just gonna fail there on the message, and it doesn't matter that much. And I have to remember, I think, on the classes that use the global signal, I have to remember to disconnect on the constructor and connect on the constructor, I think. Yeah. So the downside, the worst possible scenario, I think, is when you don't disconnect anything. So when that happens, the only thing that is gonna happen is that the list of callables is gonna have extra memory that doesn't use because you forgot to disconnect, but it's not gonna crash anything. So I think that this check doesn't make sense. And maybe I'm just gonna leave it here because it doesn't matter, but I think it's not necessary. Because you're only gonna call this function from if the instance exists of the thing. I think even here is probably not gonna return. So maybe I have to check before accessing the thing. It just returns instance ID, so I think it doesn't matter. Which is the class there. So this is only gonna be called when the object exists. So it's gonna throw another error if I don't pass anything here. And this one is gonna be from the callable, so yeah, I think that this is fine. So I'm gonna try to compile. The only thing I'm gonna do is ask Perplexity before if whether or not so how to pop, what is the best way to remove callable. I think it doesn't matter that much, but I think it's either pop or pop back because I'm adding with the pushback. Hmm. And this is another thing that I didn't think about. So maybe I should use this instead of looping there. I'm gonna look into this. So instead of doing this loop, I can just put this stuff here. Because they probably optimize the find function to work with the way that they do things there. That find signal callback. But I'm not really sure if it's gonna work. I'll have to loop to find the callable, yeah. No, these not fine. I think. Yeah, I think I need to loop because I need to access the callable to do the thing. And this should be this. Hmm. So I guess with the dots, that's weird. Yeah, guess so. Just leave like that. And there's also this erase. I'm gonna look into the list class. Oh, so the pop you don't pass anything. I can go over with the debugger and then put a breakpoint here. Just see. But I guess you can use this. So it overloads. So probably instead of pop, I have to put erase. Still, I think I can do define there and pass the signal owner ID, but I'm not really sure. I have to see how it works. So it just traverses the linked list and then compares the values of the elements with this value here. But I think that's, I don't know, I don't want to think about this because the references and the types there of the templates. So I think it's just easier to loop over the list myself. Because obviously I can go find and then. So I do the condition, but then how would I do the condition? I think, yeah, the way that I'm doing there is probably better. So just loop over and then you access the object, then compare the instance, the IDs. And then if they are the same, you remove the callback from the list. So I think that's pretty much it. I'm gonna try to compile, see what happens. I have to think more about the whole object thing. But I think that's probably not that big of a deal. And what I will have to do is just always remember to connect on the constructor and disconnect the signal on the destructor of the class. Because that way it always removes the callable there. The thing is what happens when we meet when you don't have the class, but then it's gonna throw the error from the meet signal from the callable function. And I think it's not that big of a deal. But maybe I'm wrong, so I guess we'll see. Yeah, this one I'm not gonna do anymore. Oh, it's the same. Yeah. Maybe it is good to do this as well. Hmm. Maybe it is actually a good idea to keep track of the. I do a hash map between the IDs and the object IDs and the list of callables. Because that way it would be easier to. Maybe this is a better way because it would be easier to remove all the callables. Yeah, but I think I'll have to use both. Hmm. This is interesting. Yeah, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense because I'll have to use both because of the scope. So, because I wouldn't be able to just remove from the other. So I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm gonna remove the thing on the object there. I'm gonna remove this. If this works, then I'm gonna test there. If it compiles. Yeah, the thing I have to see if this compiles is the modules. But I think that if it compiles and then if it works, then I'm just gonna I'm not gonna think about the other stuff. I'm just gonna do it like this and move on to the other things, and then maybe at some point I come back to this and think about it again. So I'm gonna look into the module classes that I created there to see. Yeah, first I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna open the project manager and then open the project that I use to test. Then just check to see if it's still working to remove the thing. Then I have to change the function. So it's graph. CVP. I was gonna write here. So I'll be right back. I'm going to show the other stuff there. So the reason why it wasn't working from last time is just because of the owner. I think I talked about this in the beginning there. But now it seems that it is working. and it adds based on the. So when you don't put set name, it shows some weird name there. And when you put set name, I basically went over how they add the meshes on the editor, and I was trying to find the. I still couldn't find the information, I think, on the owner. I don't remember how I got it. I think just asking GPT or something like that to figure out that you have to set the owner. But I got the set the name from their stuff, so they instantiate in a different way. So basically each cell there on the editor on the left that is going to show up on the meshes is a data structure that they use, which is not the same as the nodes themselves. Is a data structure that just contains information about what each thing is. So it mainly contains the name of the thing that you select. So depending on which thing you select, so first you're gonna click on the, maybe I can open there to show. I can open the, yeah, but I'm not really sure because it's compiling, so I'm not really sure if it's gonna fuck it up. But basically when you click add child nodes, it's gonna open the other GUI. Then depending which one you select, it's gonna change a variable in the editor that the editor keeps track of. And then when you click on create, it's going to use that variable and it's going to get the text from the variable. And the text just represents whatever class you selected. So on the example that I was doing there is mesh instance 3D. So the text is just going to be a string of mesh instance 3D. And then it's going to call class DB instantiate, I think, and pass that text to the class DB instantiate. And that's going to create a variant, I think. And that's going to use the, I don't remember if it's a variable. I think it creates an object. So the class DB instantiate, they use the class DB to instantiate based on the string that of the selected text. Then based on that, they get the object and then they use the cast, object cast to, which is just using dynamic cast, I think, under the hood, to change the type to the node. And that's going to be the child node. So they're basically just using class DB, and then they use another function from the editor to get the properties for the object. So first they instantiate the class, then they call another function that is gonna go over. It's gonna get all properties from the object and it's gonna initialize them. It's gonna put them as child. So that's how they build the node, the child node. But I couldn't find where at what place they set the owner for the node, because the owner is related to the edited scenes. And the edited scenes is the logic that they use to keep track of which scene is being added at the moment. But eventually, so the functionality they have to save is the same that I put there, but the main difference is the owner. And then I couldn't figure out the owner because it's related to the edited things. But basically, and also they do some other stuff that I copied here later. So they placed this other flag here because I thought that this might be the reason why it wasn't working there, but I think this is only related when it's only related to when you change the state of the class, which I haven't tested yet. So the next thing that I'm going to do is probably create a sphere mesh here and change the value of one of these classes to have that mesh to see if it's going to reflect. So when you change the value, then it's going to create a sub resource below the parts that it creates the class on the scene file. And I think that this flag is the one that allows you to save. So it does everything basically based on the package scene. And the other thing that they pass is this flag here, but I think that this is not necessary. I just put here because initially I thought that it might be the case, it might be the problem. Unexpected end of file. Oh, it's because of this. Let's sure. And the other thing that I thought it might be the case is the set path here, but I think it doesn't matter that much. This just sets, there's a member variable, I think, on the scene state and on the resource cache, which is a global variable that they use to keep track of resources to make it faster to figure out what resources are being used. So I don't have to, yeah. It's basically just cache, but I think it's on runtime. So this just sets the path on the scene state, which is a member variable of the packet scene. But the one that I'm using there is one that I'm saving here based on the path that I get from the file. So, yeah. So it's basically the same thing that they are doing there. The only difference is that I didn't have the owner. I didn't make the thing as the owner. And the other thing that I wrote down here to as a comment is that when you when you set the owner before you add as a child, it doesn't work. And I think it's because of memory. Uh, it might be because of the sub resource thing. So I'm gonna have to figure this out. But I think it doesn't matter that much as long because I'm gonna encapsulate initially. Like I spent a bunch of time looking at the way that they add the child node because I wanted to do this basically the same function, so that I don't have to think about it. But then I think it's just gonna be easier if I just encapsulate this stuff on the function, and then I just then I don't have to think about it again. So I create another abstraction called add child node, for example, and then I just pass the two nodes through that function, and then I just do this stuff here. Like all that I have to remember is to add is to change the properties of the things before I add the node as a child, I think, or after I add the node as a child. I think you use a dot because it's using the a percent operator instead of the star that I don't know very well. So it's probably the same here. But this one is kind of weird. Got an instance ID. I think it's just on this one because this one should be a pointer. So object ID probably has another function. Just make sure. Oh, it overloads. So I think if I just do from the class directly, I don't have to access this. It's overloading the operator here. Yeah, I'm gonna try to do it from the thing directly. So let me try like this, then see what happens. So is one on the error. Or is the same thing? Yeah, I just use get instance again. You must return a value. Hmm. But it's probably because it wasn't working there before, I think. Oh, because it didn't make part of the class. Yeah. That's why I found it weird uh, that it was another color there, but makes sense. I felt that it was something weird because of the color, but I didn't think about the class there. So let me try again, see what happens. So is the types. Yeah. Can the CPP scripts be visible in the editor like GD scripts? No, it works in a different way. It was very confusing to me first as well. But the way, and there might be a different way. So there's two different ways actually. One way to add script functionality from C++ is to inherit from a class and then add functionality to it and then use that instead. So in the example I have here, so in the documentation that they have there, basically C++ modules or something like that. So what you do is you create a folder inside of this modules folder, and then the name of the folder has to be the same name you put here on these functions. These are functions that they give you because what the engine is going to do is at some point it's going to call, it's going to generate a file dynamically at build time based on whatever folders you have inside of modules. And that file is going to call these functions for each one of the folders you have here. And these functions are going to initialize the class on the, so the name in the middle has to be the same name of the folder you put here. And then inside of these functions, you call this macro or you call the function directly to register whatever classes you have, you create inside of this folder on the class DB, which is a class that Godot uses to keep track of all the classes inside of the engine. So this class DB just registers a class with the type there that you put on the macro. And this basically allows you to create new classes. So if you want to extend the functionality, for example, of Node 3D or Mesh Instance 3D, all you have to do is just inherit from that class, and then you put extra functions here. And then when you open the editor, you can get the node with the name that you put here. So the name is going to show up there. In my case, it's graph, so I have access to the graph node. So each time I put the graph node, it's going to have the additional functionality that I put here as functions. So you're extending the class. You're extending a class through a class hierarchy, and then you're adding new functions because it works based on the cycles of events that they have. So the way that the events are gonna work, I did a stream some time ago. I don't remember the name, but like I think it's a 40 or 50 minutes string that explains this difference. So there's two different things that can they're gonna be called for all the nodes. One is the notification function, and the other one is the signals. So notifications are called for each node during the rendering cycle. So and it's an abstract function, which means that you can put that function on your class, the class you inherited. So in this class, for example, I could put the notification function, and what that means is that Godot or the engine is going to call that function at some points, some parts of the cycle. And inside of that function, you put a switch statement that allows you to determine what part of the cycle the function is being run at, which would be, for example, when a node enters the tree or when a node accesses the tree. So you can see on the editor node this function, to have an idea of how it works. It's basically this function here. So it's just a switch. Then depending on what kind of part of the cycle it is gonna this value is gonna be different. And then you put here whatever functionality you want. So this is one way to add scripting functionality. The other way would be just to override the functions, I think, that are related for each part of for the events. So usually it's going to be on the control nodes. I haven't seen on the other types of nodes, but on the way that the control node works is that the base type of the control node is the node that is used to create GUI elements. So this is mainly the node, mainly the node that is going to be used to deal with events, because usually, obviously you have on the other ones as well, but I haven't spent too much time on the other ones to see. Yeah, but usually the way that it's going to work is that they're going to put on the constructor. So I think the easiest example is that I know now is the control nodes. So, but it's basically going to be the same pattern on the other ones. You have a base class that is either control node or node 2D or node 3D. Those classes have abstract base class functions, which is basically a function with virtual. That means that you can inherit from the class and override the behavior of what happens, or you can listen to the events that the classes send. Each node is going to have standard events, which I believe I wrote down here on the SkyDraw. You can see that on the editor as well. When select a node, you can look on the right there. I'm gonna see if it is on compiling. I'm gonna open from here. I'm gonna see if I can open because I just compiled. It's easier to show with the editor. So one way is extending the class through hierarchy and then putting other functionality based on this stuff that happens for each node. And the other way to add is to use the GD extension. And GD extension is just a class that is a member variable of the class, and that's what the GD script is as well. The class related to managing GD script is the script instance class, which is going to be a member variable of the object class. And then at certain points of the rendering cycle, it's going to be the same logic from the notification, but slightly different. That is going to check to see whether or not the object has a script instance. And if it does have, it's going to call some function from a macro, and it has to be a macro because it's created at build time. And then that function from the macro is going to call the function from GD script through this abstract base class thing as well. So the script instance has a function called call, for example, that is a virtual function. Then the GD script is a class that is going to inherit from script instance, if I remember correctly. I'm not really sure though. I could be wrong about this. So, but it's basically going to call I'm pretty sure that it's going to call through that bridge there. That it calls through script instance and the language server as well, or script language server, something like that. Those classes, they're going to make the bridge between the C++ code and the classes that manage the GD script. And all that GD script is doing is using another class called variant to translate types from the class DB, which is the class that manages everything, to the language that GD script creates, which is just parsing, I think, code based on whatever grammar they have there. So they parse based on the grammar, which is going to be based on events. And you can see the macro as well. I forgot the names of the macros, but it's GD something. Maybe GD bind. There's some certain macros that allow you to that are the macros responsible for subscribing the signals on that are going to be used on the scripting language. It's maybe 0. I think it's on the object, so it's going to be on the object path there. Not sure if no, it's this one. So this is the file that is generated. So it's basically these macros here. These macros allow them to at certain points in certain classes. I think on the node class is gonna subscribe this. So on the node, inside of the node class is gonna call this macro with the name of the event here, for example. And the reason why they do this is because of versions. So it becomes easier to write the code based on the version. So here would be a signal that you see on the GDScript interface there when you're coding from GDScript. And all that this is going to do is going to create all these other functions here. And these functions are called at certain points of the rendering cycle to see whether or not the object, if the object has a script instance, it's going to call one of these functions. And these are the functions that are responsible for implementing the functionality that you put on the GDScript on the file there. It's basically the same name. And then it's just calling from the script instance. So another thing you can do is just use the GD extension, I think is the name, which is basically the same pattern that script instance does. It just creates a member variable inside. It is a member variable inside of the object class, and it's going to be the same thing. So this one is for managing with the scripting languages. I think is either C# or GDScript, and the other one is somewhere here as well. Yeah, I think it's this one, GD extension. No, it's GD extension, but there's the other one there. It's probably this. Yeah, it's this class here. So this is another way you can extend functionality. And this way I think is more similar to the way that script instance work, but I didn't spend too much time into this yet. But I imagine it's going to be pretty much the same thing. So it's just checking here in the same way that it's checking for the script instance. It checks to see whether or not the object has an extension. And if it does, it's going to call some function from that, which is going to be probably a virtual function, which means you can create a class that inherits from that class and override the behavior of the function. So this is like the base function. And then when you create a new class and you inherit, it allows you to put whatever functionality you want to run here when the function is called. So the function is assigned inside of the classes, and then it is called based on this patterns here, these names here. So the functions are called through this name, but they're initialized with the macro inside of the class, because that way you have flexibility. So for example, the main loop here, it subscribes everything here. And these are the events that you're going to see on the GDScript. So the name is with an underscore, and is the reason why, like, is a different name. So it's a different function than the one that exists on C++. But they probably put with the underscore to basically make it easier to think about because obviously these functions are going to be called at the same parts of the cycle that the other functions from C++ would call. So in C++, I'm pretty sure that it's physics process, but then on GDScript it's going to be underscore physics process, and they're called in the same part of the cycle. So it's basically the same. It's almost the same name, so that is easier to understand. And I think this macro here is being called from here. So you're just passing the event. This is basically calling the thing. So physics time quit. Maybe somewhere else. Yeah, so this macro is going to call the function like this. So this function here that the macro calls is just going to pass based on the event. So the m name is going to be the name of the event. And this is generated through the macro, which is here. So it's the same function. So it subscribes using this stuff here inside of the class. Then when it wants to call, it uses another macro, which is basically just going to call based on the name of the event, which is going to do the same thing there. You're just going to check to see It's gonna call some function from the script instance, and then that function probably is gonna call some other classes or whatever. I didn't spend too much time on this part. It's the same with the extension. Hmm. Just complaining that it. Oh, no problem, man. It's complaining that it has to return a value. That's weird. So I guess it wouldn't make sense for this to return. So let me see if I can open here. I don't remember which. I think it was. I think it was this. I don't remember. So obviously, I think there's something here that's inside of the macro. It's probably the way that I'm passing this information. Hmm. I'm gonna comment that out and see if it compiles. It is kind of confusing though. The It's because before I was using Godot, I was doing from scratch, so it's kind of hard to. It's confusing to transition from one way of thinking to the other because if you're gonna in the way that I'm doing there, which I think is the easiest way, you just inherit the class and implement functionality. It becomes like you're locked into the object-oriented paradigm. So like the line between creating the tree and creating the nodes and how that's gonna relate to the functionality is very confusing because in a way they are the same thing, but it's just a gradient. So you have some functionality that builds the tree and then some other functionality that. So the functionality for scripting is just changing the behavior of the nodes, and the functionality for building the tree is changing the behavior of the tree. But in a way they are very similar because the what happens on the scene can either be because of the behavior of nodes or behaviors or the behavior the behavior inside of the node or the behavior of the node in relationship to everything else. So for example, you have a graph, which is my case, the stuff that I'm trying to do. It becomes confusing because the graph has a bunch of children and then like on the scene. Yeah, what happens on the scene like depends on the relationship between the different meshes, mesh instance 3D, which would be the structure of the scene and the behavior of each mesh itself. Let's say so. Like I was forced to create this class to put everything as a child of the graph, which wasn't the way I was doing before. The way I was doing before is the class is a separate thing, the graph is a separate thing, and then you create the meshes and then you manage the meshes through the graph, which is a separate thing from the scene. But the way that it is here, I'm forced to put the graph inside of the scene because otherwise I don't have access to the node. And that's the part that was confusing to me, I think. Because then it would fall into the logic of building the tree. That makes sense. It's very similar, but it's kind of slightly different. I think this might be fucking it up because I tried to compile there and like maybe this is the other version or it could be something with this project that I don't remember really well. I'm gonna close this. Yeah, I talked about this as well, but a graph is tree is a graph, which is something that I just realized as well. Is a fundamental pattern of programming. I'm pretty sure that it is. So this is something that is always gonna happen. I think so. Usually we're gonna have a tree because the tree is related to the stack, the is the movement of time cycles. But usually a tree is built to handle memory, and then once you get to a threshold where the flow of memory, flow of data, the tree can't handle the flow of data. If you imagine, like, is the same way that it works on a physical place. So if you have a building that can't stand the weight, then it's just gonna fall. So what naturally happens is you create a global context. So usually when the tree can handle the flow of data, it becomes a graph, and it becomes a graph through the global context. So that's the reason why the heap exists, I think, is the relationship between the heap and the stack. It's just the flow of data. So what's really happening is that everything is actually a graph, but it looks like it is a tree under some relative reference frame of data. And what is actually happening is just converging between one and the other based on the reference frame of the computation of the observer. So I'm gonna comment this out, and then I'm gonna see. I don't remember which project I tested that thing. Um, if I if that one doesn't work, then I'll just create another one. It might be because of the. I don't think it's the version. I'll think about this later. Well, the thing that I was gonna show is that I forgot is the file, the sync file. So maybe I'll do that before I stop streaming. And the last one that I was doing to create the sync for the code is this one. So yeah. So now it basically creates the same. I'm not really sure if you add from the editor if it's gonna do that. But here I think like now because I changed the name there, it's just creating another. It's just putting this number here at the end every time that I add the mesh with the code, and then it doesn't matter what I do on the editor, it still doesn't change the file. Like it doesn't. What I thought it would happen is that when you change through the editor or the second time that you run the code, it would add because I'm adding two nodes to the base node, which is the node 3D on the code, on the root node of the scene. I thought what would happen is that each time that I run the code, it would add two additional more. But that's not what happens. It just doesn't do anything if I have those nodes there. So this is the part that is interesting to me, and I think that it has to do with the way that is writing to the file based on the memory. So, but I'm not 100% like I don't understand very well how it works. But the thing that I wasn't thinking, I think, before is that like it is this separation between the creation of the scene and the creation of the nodes. So for the creation of the scene, it doesn't matter. Like each class is the thing is it does matter because of the sub resources. That's the thing. But the main thing that matters is the type and the type and how many types you have and the structure of the hierarchy here. So I think that's because of that when you create in the same way each time. So when you create in the same way, it's not gonna overwrite the file. But I'm not. So I think this makes it easier, the stuff that I was thinking about, because then I don't have to think about from the code's perspective. But I do have to think about in order to incorporate the stuff that happens on the GUI into the structure. But I think that happens already because of the way that I'm loading the nodes. So I'm loading the node through the file using the resource loader. So that means that the root that I get is going to have the state. So the question is, why doesn't it change the tree in a different way each time? Because it should be changing a different tree because I get in a different state. And I think that the reason why is because of the hashing of the name. So this is the thing that I'm not sure about. I still think it's kind of complicated anyway. I'm gonna have to spend more time thinking about this. It's complicated, but it's less complicated than I thought it would be. Because then I can always create the same structure from the code, and it doesn't matter what happens in the editor. But the code's not gonna be is not gonna be aware of the other stuff on the scene. But I think that is fine. Is a lot easier to think about because then you can think about the stuff that happens on the code as a separate thing. But it's still kind of tricky. And the question is how to change the functionality based on the changes made on the editor. But I think that's gonna be easier than I thought. But I have to do a lot of experiments to, and that's what I'm gonna do next after I finish this stuff from the signals. I'm going to see what I'm just gonna try to build stuff and then see what happens, and then like, the more times that I do, the easier and more clear it's gonna be to figure out like how to structure things there on the other one. But I want to get over with this signal stuff. It has to be this one, so I'm not really sure. I do remember, so maybe it's because of the at one point when I was doing the module there, I was getting a bunch of errors. I don't remember. No, it was correlated to. Oh, it's because of the global signals. So the reason why I was getting a bunch of errors is because I created the class in a wrong way because I was following the way that the engine is created. So the global signals class, which is the singleton, I was creating one based on the version of the engine that is not the like let's say official one, because there's the core bind version, which is the one that is subscribed on ClassDB, and the core bind version uses another version of the engine that has some configurations, which I think is another thing that can be changed, but I'm not 100% sure. I think I'm pretty confident now that it can be changed. So, but I'm not really sure if it's worth it to try to change. But it's basically one of them was created through interface with GDScript, and the other one is more for the other stuff. So I was following that pattern to build the singleton, and then because of that, I was doing the memory wrong, and then I changed that to initialize in the same way that I was doing based on the one that is not the engine version that is not the let's say the official one. So then I changed to make it based on the core bind one, and then it worked. It removed all the signals, but it was during that time that I created this project here. So I'm not really sure if that's is something like that that is going on, where like it cached something in the wrong way, and then now I'm getting these errors because I was getting errors like this similar, and then after I made all the changes on new projects, I didn't get stuff anymore. Or it could be because of the way, or something that I changed there on the global signals now that's fucking up. What I do remember is that the error messages here were not, like it wasn't very clear based on whatever shows here. It wasn't very clear that the error was the error that I was getting there. And I think it's just complicated because of the way ClassDB and everything else works. So apparently something related to the dialogues. Something to parents about that. Yeah, in this it seems that it's fuck up. Oh no, it's just because the thing. Yeah, so let me play and see what happens. Interesting. So maybe it wasn't this one. Hmm. Oh, I think I deleted something to test something. Don't remember really well. But I do remember that I deleted some stuff on some project and then I added again to see, like deleted, added, did a bunch or different experiments to see what would happen with the errors. Because I do think there's a problem, but now I'm not 100% sure if this is a problem because of the way that I did the global classes or not. But I think that there might be an issue where you attach a script to a file and then you connect the script to another file and then delete the original file. I do remember there was something like this that in that case the editor would just throw some errors even though uh, so it might be a bug or something. But I don't remember now if I deleted something here. It might be because of a file that I deleted to do some experiments. Yeah, but I think it wasn't this project because I did have a button. So, hmm. So maybe I deleted the project by mistake. I guess I just create another one and see what happens. I'm just gonna create another project and then test this stuff. I'm gonna try to open, but the main scene I think is not because, or the scene study because this is the one that I created to study the other stuff. So I'm gonna create another one. It could be, I'm gonna try the experiment. So obviously it's compiling here. I think that should work there. I guess I can look for, yeah, doesn't matter. I have to build the scene anyway, so I create a custom button and a graph class. And then I make them as siblings of each other. And then on one of the classes, the custom button class is going to emit the events. The graph class connects to the events on the constructor. And then it changes. Oh, this is another thing that I have to do, is to change the function on the graph to accept a variable number of arguments. This is another thing that I'm not really sure, because I think this comes from the Godot. It wasn't because of something I did. But I can download some other version and see if this happens. I think this is from the most recent one, and it's not because of something I did. It's just a bug, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not gonna spend time, I think. So this was the one. So this was the one actually. So was the experiment. So basically, I did this stuff. The graph is the custom class that I created. The custom button is the other class. So the question is, so when I click here, it changes the position. The question is which thing I do first. I focus on changing this class to accept. I think I probably should do this first. So now obviously I'm gonna put the disconnect there, but so I have to change this so that it depends on the position, because I want to translate back and forth to see if when I disconnect, if it is gonna work. The easiest way, I'm not gonna. The easiest way is just to change on the code and then experiment through the code instead of creating another class and then whatever. But I think it's probably better to see what happens. Um, hmm. So I should test as well to remove the arguments and then see what happens when you emit the function. I think what is going to happen is just going to send a message that the function either put more arguments or less and see what happens. Because this functionality is the same way that the normal signals work. So I imagine that it should be handled by the errors that they already have, but for this situation, I'm gonna change to accept I'm gonna do a templated function. It's gonna be a variadic template, and then I'm gonna loop over the arguments. And I was looking at the emit signal as well, that on the variant class they have a function that translates the argument, and they just use reinterpret cast, I think. They use functions from standard or from standard library, I think. I'm not sure if the reinterpret cast is from standard library, but or is a built-in. I think it's from standard library. So on the functions that they translate the types, that's pretty much what's happening. So it is annoying, but not that. It's gonna be on the callable actually. It's on the callable because it's but I imagine these cases where you emit a signal and the signal is supposed to call a function, but it doesn't emit with the arguments that the function wants. It should be handled by the errors there, I think. But this is another question, and I have to review the keyword arguments on C++. But I think usually you pass as a struct when you want keyword arguments. You create a class or a struct and then pass that instead. Or default arguments, not keyword arguments. Default arguments. I don't remember at all. I have to review this. Yeah, so what I can do here, so I have to see. At first I'm gonna test this stuff. Then if it works, I think next thing I have to do is this thing here. I have to change this function. Then once I change that, then I'm ready to build the component from code, I think. First I'm gonna do the other project, like I said, and follow the tutorials. And then after that, I create the classes, and then I build the component from the codes, and then test to see. I think at first I'm just gonna change the positions. So I'm gonna add, and I'm gonna build the code from the source as well. So get the tree adds the nodes that I want in the same way that I was doing the other one, and then save the thing, then open that from the editor, and then play from the editor to see what happens. So I'm gonna see on the custom button to see I was sending this value. So I'm connecting on the constructor, and no, actually this one is the normal one. So this is the normal pattern that they use on Godot, because I'm inheriting this from the button class, which is the class that they also use on the engine, and it's a class from the engine. Also use on the editor, and it's a class on the engine. Which is, this one is going to inherit from control node, because everything that is a GUI element inherits from control node. And then the control node is going to emit an event that is going to call a function when the event's emitted when you interact with the window through the input cycle there, through the processing of inputs in the beginning of the iteration, or before the iteration on the main rendering cycle. It's going to pull events, and then it's going to call a function from the control node, which I think that one of these classes inherit or change the functionality from the control node. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they do. And then inside of one of these functions that these classes call, they're going to emit an event, which is the pressed event. So this happens whenever you click the button. So you can connect to that on your class. Here I'm connecting on the constructor, which is a normal event from Godot. And then you subscribe a callback function to happen whenever this event is emitted. So whenever the button is clicked. Then you pass the instance you want the function to be called from. And here is the function pointer. This creates the callable there that is going to be used to check when the event's being emitted on the signal map, I think. Signal map, which is host signal data on the object that emits the events to check to see if it's subscribed to the event. And it's basically going to call the function when the event's emitted. And then this one is the one that I access the global class that I created to emit the global signal, the scope, this, and using this value. So this value is a value from here, which is, yeah. So this one I'm going to change as well, because I want to set multiple, I think I'm going to do based on a struct instead. It's easier than, yeah, I have to see what happens when you emit signal to, I'm going to do a bunch of tasks, actually. So I'm going to do based on emit signal using structs class. A bunch of tasks to see how everything is gonna happen. Variary templates don't make sense for a meeting, just the function. Maybe before I do this, actually global, then I test the variadic templates. But I think it's easier probably if I can do it with destruct, it's easier with destruct. But it's worth to maybe on the receiving, yeah, on the receiving one. Oh, the receiving also makes sense to receive destruct, because then I can just create a struct that is gonna be like physics values in the same way that I was doing there on the other one. It's just gonna keep track of the. I just put all the information that I need here. Then the other one receives and then checks to see. I just make a default based on these values that I have here. I make the defaults there, and then it doesn't matter. Yeah, because it's not gonna be a button actually. It's gonna be like another class that has a bunch of different buttons or sliders. I'm just gonna get from the. I'm gonna try to copy the same way that the editor does. Then change the state of the class based on whatever displays on the GUI, and then I send the information based on the states. So that way I don't need to check, because the ones that are not changed are gonna be just the default value, because they're gonna reflect the state of the class that manages the GUI. So yeah, so here what I'm gonna do now is just test to. So I'm gonna put condition. I think it's based on the thing. It's not no. Yeah. So first I'm gonna do this, so that way it flips there. Actually, I have to change. Let me think. Because it's always gonna be 5. Hmm. So maybe what I can do is I do another variable inside of this class and then I change that variable. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So I put a variable inside of this class. Not sure if I should make. Just trying to think about the easiest thing possible. Yeah, there we go. I think this should work probably. The only thing that I'm not really sure is the like the memory, but I think it's gonna work. It should be easier or should be whatever. I'm just gonna test like this. So the first time is gonna be 1, so it should send here. Next time is gonna be true, so it should send here. Yeah, whatever. I need to initialize here because it could be the case that it doesn't have. I'm gonna test like this. If this works, then I put the disconnect there on one of the branches, and then I see if it's gonna change or not. Hmm. So there's a problem there. Here. Did this problem happen last time? So maybe I was using the older version. Static assertion failed. Error names. It's probably because of the. It's probably because I changed No, but I think these are different things, probably. I don't think that's because I changed the enum there. It might be. Yeah, it might be because I changed this. Hmm. So I'm just gonna comment this out, then use the unavailable there. Yes, whatever. I think it's not worth it to spend a bunch of time on these minor things. There's lots of other stuff to think about it. So as long as it's not something that is gonna crash everything, and I think it's unlikely that that thing would or will. So now it's gonna take a longest time. It's almost done the time. But the signal thing I think is a lot easier than the other stuff you think about. So the other stuff are more concerned. The main thing that I is gonna take some time, I think, because I have to. The best way to go about it is just to build something and see what happens. But I think it is gonna be easier than I was thinking it's gonna be. Hopefully, but it's still gonna be hard. But if the code always treats the tree as if it is on the beginning, let's say. The problem, so I guess the first thing that I have to test when it comes to that is like what happens if I try to add. So I change the tree from the. So I run from the code first, then I go in the editor and I add another node as a child of one of the nodes. Then I go from the code again, I change the code, and I try to add a child to the one that was added through the GUI. Then I see what happens. Because it seems that I think it is gonna work because you're getting the same object, which is just a reflection of the file. And the thing that matters when it comes to the code is the ID that it creates through the names. So it's just the quantity because and I think this is the part I was getting confused by because of the separation between scripts and the creation of the tree. When it comes to the creation of the tree, the only thing that matters is the type and the amount of types that it has. So it doesn't really matter that much. But it's still kind of complicated because like if you want the code base to be an accurate reflection of the what is happening on the scene, because like the more time you spend on like asynchronous changes, the harder it becomes to think about when you're reading through the code what the scene looks like. That's the part that is kind of difficult to think about. But I guess it is not that big of a deal, I think. Yeah, I think I have to figure out if it's possible to change the, but it doesn't matter because I always have access to that thing. Yeah, I think it's not gonna matter probably because I have to change. So the question is, what happens when you change the code from the GUI and then you want to make changes on the original code? Because you're getting everything. The other thing that I thought it was confusing, that is going to be another thing that's kind of hard to think about, is that obviously each project has a lot of scenes, but I was just thinking about one scene for now. But this is another thing that is kind of hard to think about. But I think that these kinds of things are things that's there isn't a way to really it's project by project thing. So you have to focus, like you have to create the codes when it comes time to build the scene. So there isn't anything you can do about it to make it easier on a systematic way, let's say, to for all the things you're gonna do or all the projects. Because for each project is gonna have the project is gonna have different things, and then there's different things you will want to do for different things. But this is kind of the thing is, I guess like it does matter because like maybe I'll have to encode whatever scene I'm gonna change on the command line. I think I'm gonna have to do that. Because let's say you have a project and you have a main scene and then you're working on that scene one day and then you wanna work on the other one. Uh, like would that matter? I guess it wouldn't matter. Um, because if the code doesn't change the file, it just reruns, it just rebuilds everything that the file already has. It doesn't add to it based on the previous history, the cache. Then I think it doesn't matter, because then you can always build from the like it's just gonna run the code that you already had for the other scenes. So all I had to do is just do it from other ones. Yeah, but it's gonna have to be. Maybe I'll change instead of a vector or do something else. I'll do a hash because it makes more sense to make the functions based on the not the vector, but I don't remember now if I think it is a hash. So I think I think it is a vector. It makes more sense to have a hash, I think. So I should have a hash of the sync path and yeah, that's the thing that was confusing me. And that's gonna change the structure of the functions. So it makes more sense to have a hash. To have a hash between the sync path and the sync info. That makes a lot more sense. I mean, maybe I don't even put the path on the info, just do the hash between the path and the information. Because if I have a vector, then it forces me to loop over all the things, even though actually no, I can access based on the index. So maybe it doesn't matter that much. Yeah, maybe it doesn't matter that much. Just access based on the index. No, but it is still annoying. It's better to do hash because then the index you have to remember. Let's say you're working on a project, then you wanna like if I do a hash, then it makes more sense. I can get the sync file name and then figure out how to use dir access to get the relative path. Then based on the file name, I get access to this data that represents that sync. I think that makes a lot more sense. So I'm gonna change that. So I'm gonna write down to change. So this was something that was kind of I felt that when I was writing the other functions, like this feels weird because I have to loop over the vector to change the things. It felt kind of weird. And these bugs sometimes. I'm gonna put here. I don't know why it does that. What the fuck? If I do this. It's probably because of the number. Ah, whatever. Yeah, I think it worked. The hardest part of this is not writing the code, it's just thinking about all the other stuff, understanding how everything is connected, I think. It's a lot harder than writing. Once you understand how everything works, it becomes a lot easier to think about stuff. Hmm. Yeah, whatever. So it wasn't, yeah, it was actually what I intended, but I was thinking more that it would go back and forth, but whatever. So it is working. So now I'm gonna test to see if I can disconnect. So here I'm gonna call the same thing there. So here. And then I just pass this. This is another thing I wasn't sure, but signal owner. So yeah. Hmm. So the question is, how do I pass the object? Maybe we could pass the ID already. Hmm. Yeah, I think I can pass the ID. Don't need to pass the object. And then I just get this. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So I move this stuff through here. Then I pass object ID there. And maybe I don't. Yeah, I'm gonna do it like this. If it takes too long to figure out, then I'm just gonna stop streaming because the timer ran out. But if I can test, then I'm gonna see, and then after I test, I'm going to stop. Hopefully it works, and then can move on to the other stuff. I'm actually pretty close to being able to build stuff after all this time and all this stuff that I have to learn. I think building is probably gonna be easier than understanding, hopefully. The hard part's understand everything. Hopefully this works. Hmm. Oh, it worked. Huh. Yeah, because the first time it doesn't. Yeah, nice. I thought because you worked on the second time, it wasn't gonna work. Yeah, nice. So when I click, it's remote. Nice. So now I'm gonna stop streaming now, and next time I'm going to focus on the other stuff here. So the main thing that I wanna know now is what happens with different variations of connection and emission of signals with the data on the arguments. What happens? So I'm gonna test this stuff. Then after I figure that out, I'm going to spend time. I'm gonna build another project, and I'm going to follow tutorials, I think, and just build from the editor. Uh, Try to build something similar to this stuff here. So maybe I'll just look into the code, actually. I'm gonna watch some editors and see, watch some tutorials and see if any of them have something similar to this that they build. But maybe I'll just look into the code. So I'm gonna write down all the elements that I think I need here and try to figure out on the editor if they use this. So like stuff to write, to select, to the range, the stuff that shows up here. And I'm going to clarify how the enums that they put there work and how do they change the appearance to be either an icon or the label or stuff like that. Then I'm going to I'm going to try to build a simple thing from the editor, this stuff here, and see if I can do that. Then if I can do that, what I'm going to do is just go from the C++ code, add a new class to the modules, and I'm going to do basically the same way that they do on the editor. Just going to be one class that is going to work probably as a doc, and then that class is going to have member variables, and then member variables are going to be these things here. And this is something that I have to think about that is kind of frustrating me, which is the separation, because it would make more sense to build like one class, one member variable, and then build several different nodes of that. For example, for this stuff here, which I think is what I did on React. So you build like a component, for example, that handles one of the lines here, and then you just build another function that creates several different components with different data and then creates different things. But based on the way that it works there, I think that's the reason why it's kind of frustrating me, is that if I do this from codes, build a tree from codes, I'm going to build the tree on one part, which is going to be on the headless, and I'm going to build the class on another part. So they become decoupled, and it becomes kind of hard to think about the connection between them. So I'm gonna have to see, like maybe what I'll have to do is go the GD extension route and spend more time trying to understand how that works. Just see if it makes more sense to do something like that. So, yeah, but probably I'm going to continue the way that I'm doing there. And yeah, I'm probably gonna hard code if I do it with the modules because the amount of things that I have here is not dynamic. But maybe I'll have to because there's another option there. Just remember, like if you click edges, it changes the thing. So maybe I have to. But I guess I can put that. I can make it based on the. I can add a function to the class that does that on the constructor based on the initialization of the class. So the connection of sub resources and the modules, I think, is the next thing to clarify. Because I haven't tested this yet when I build the tree directly from code, and the nodes have sub resources. So sub resource is just gonna be when you change the member variable of a class, it's gonna put on the sync file a sub resource thing, yeah, below the resource. So I have to see what happens. If I can do, yeah, if I can do it from code and change the sub resource, then maybe it's not that big of a deal because you can add the functionality on the class to create the components based on the whatever the constructor has. Yeah, but I don't think it's that big of a deal either way. So I'm gonna spend more time thinking about this. And after I build the thing from the editor, I'm gonna build from code with the class that it creates there. And then I'll spend more time clarifying this relationship between the sub resources and the resources. So